What is going on, everybody? Thank you guys so much for joining me. And of course, I'm continuing my series on my NHL 2021-2022 season prediction. And for today's video, we're going to be talking about a team that's always in the headlines, and that being the Toronto Maple Leafs. So entering last season, the Toronto Maple Leafs have always established themselves as a pretty good regular season team. And whether they would make the playoffs, it was unquestionable. They would always make the playoffs. However, their playoff failures have always haunted this team, not able to get out of the first round since 2004. So taking a look at what they did last season, a 35-14-7 record for 77 points, which was first in the North Division. They definitely hyped themselves up a lot. 113-point pace. However, in typical Toronto Maple Leafs fashion, they once again folded in the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs as the overwhelming favorite, blowing a 3-1 series lead to the Montreal Canadiens. Taking a look at their stats from last season, pretty good offensive team, 3.32 goals for per game, which ranks 6th. Power play was more so in the middle of the pack, 20%, 16th in the NHL. Look at the defensive stats, actually did pretty well as well, 2.64 goals against per game, which ranks 7th. So they're top 10 in both offense and defense. However, their penalty kill, surprisingly underwhelming, 78.5% penalty kill percentage, which was only tied for 23rd. Even the power play, I would say, is a little bit underwhelming given all the star talent they have. So although very good offensive and defensive stats, special teams a little lackluster. Taking a look at their top 5 scorers from last season, their leading scorer being Mitch Marner, who in 55 games had 20 goals and 47 assists for 67 points. We all know Mitch Marner is a very crafty, elite winger, one of the best playmakers in the NHL, but come playoff time, of course, his numbers do take a dip. He is a little bit disappointing, hasn't scored a goal in those last 2 playoff runs. And in second, we have Auston Matthews, who in 52 games had an incredible season goal scoring wise, 41 goals, 25 assists for 66 points to take home the Maurice Richard Trophy. Now, no disrespect to Alex Ovechkin, I think he has a ton left in the tank, but I think Auston Matthews from this point on has established himself as the best goal scorer in the NHL. In third, we got John Tavares, who in 56 games scored 19 goals, 31 assists for 50 points. Now, Tavares has had some minor consistency issues over the course of the year, but no, 50 points is still pretty solid. I think they probably would have expected him to maybe score more than 20 goals, but at the same time, Tavares playing in a second line role, that's as good of a production as you can get from him. Fourth, we got William Nylander, who in 51 games had 17 goals and 25 assists for 42 points. Nylander's another guy that I feel like can contribute much more, but at the same time, still a very solid winger. And of course, he was one of the big boys that showed up in the playoffs for the Leafs, or one of the few players actually for Toronto. Then in fifth, we have Morgan Rielly, who in 55 games had 5 goals and added 30 assists for 35 points. I mean, obviously, there's not much to say about Morgan Rielly. He's just a terrific #1 defenseman. Very good offensive defenseman. This production seems about right for him. Then in goal, I will throw out Frederik Andersen because he did struggle in 24 games, 13-8-3, a 2.96 goals against average, and an 895 save percentage. Obviously, Andersen had a very tough season last year, and it was revealed that, he was playing hurt throughout most of the season, so it wouldn't make sense as to why his production wasn't all that great, and he didn't show up all that well. However, they did get a gem in Jack Campbell, who stepped up his game, 22 games, 17-3-2 record, a 2.15 goals against average, and a 921 save percentage. So Campbell basically stole the net as the starting goaltender on this Toronto Maple Leafs team, and I believe he has a record now. I think he passed Carey Price for most consecutive wins to start a season, so kudos to him. Now, whether he's a legitimate #1 goaltender in this league, I'm not sure, but in a tandem role, he's obviously very solid. And I don't think there's any question that Jack Campbell really gave it his all in the postseason. He played outstanding. He gave them great numbers. He gave the Leafs a chance to win, but just the Leafs, they couldn't solve Carey Price. They couldn't score goals on him, but Jack Campbell definitely came to play. So looking at this roster on paper, there's just no question that there is a ton of talent. Now, they have a ton of money riled up in those top 4 forwards there, but the question is not if this team can make the playoffs. The question is not how well they play in the regular season. It's what they do in the playoffs that matters. They still have not won a series since 2004, and until this core gets it done, there's going to be a ton of pressure on this Leafs team over the next few years. Entering this season, I feel like we should still expect a pretty solid team here with the guys they have up front, and they have a pretty solid defense, honestly. I feel like they made a ton of strides defensively. They definitely improved there. In terms of their offseason moves, we'll dissect them and see what type of impact they'll make, and if they can help make this team advance in the Stanley Cup playoffs. In terms of what they did in the offseason, I think it appears they got a little bit weaker. Picking up Peter Mrazek is pretty solid. I feel like he's a pretty solid goaltender. The only question with Mrazek is, can he stay healthy? Over the last few years, he's had a ton of struggles staying healthy. He's always been injury prone in Carolina. But I feel like that's a pretty good replacement for Frederik Andersen, who Andersen, ironically enough, ended up signing with the Hurricanes. They also added some pretty decent depth forwards, I'd say, one being Nick Ritchie, who's coming off a relatively solid year for Boston. I definitely think Ritchie's a good piece that can fill a pretty solid top 6 role, maybe a third line role in a scoring situation. I feel like, he's pretty good there. They also added Andre Kasha, who's coming off, basically an injury-riddled year with Boston Bruins, barely played at all. Not exactly sure what type of production we can expect from Kasha, but I feel like there's definitely still some skill sets, still a little bit of upside there for him, so maybe he can, resurrect his career a little bit and play pretty solidly on the Toronto Maple Leafs. In terms of what they lost, like I mentioned, they lost Andersen, coming off a pretty bad year, and hopefully he bounces back in Carolina. They shedded Joe Thornton to the Florida Panthers, still an old guy, can still be a decent playmaker in a bottom 6 role. That's not a huge loss for this Leafs team, honestly, though. They also lost Nick Foligno, who didn't really contribute a ton offensively for this team after being acquired. Biggest loss, of course, being Zach Hyman, though. I feel like he was a very solid contributor on that top line with Mitch Marner and Austin Matthews. It's going to be interesting who they replace on that top line with those two skilled forwards, because they're going to need another guy who can be a very solid grinder and really, win some puck battles and put those guys in great positions to, thrive offensively. And although you could say they got weaker a little bit in terms of their offseason, I just feel like they're still probably a playoff team. Taking a look at my predictions for the top 5 scorers for the Toronto Maple Leafs this upcoming year. First place, I'm going to go with Mitch Marner here. 27 goals, 69 assists for 96 points. Like I said before, he's one of the best playmakers in the game. And some of you might think that Austin Matthews should lead the team in scoring, but I just feel like Marner's going to pick up a ton more points because he's a better playmaker and he's going to pick up a ton of assists. Plus, if he gets 20 plus goals, I feel like that should put him about over 90 points. Although Matthews I do have as well over 90 points, but I just feel like Marner, if he has a really solid goal scoring season where he breaks over 25 goals, he should be the leading scorer on the Maple Leafs. Speaking of Matthews, though, I do have him second on the team in scoring with 55 goals and 38 assists for 93 points. And I do have him winning the Rocket Richard Trophy for the 2nd straight year. So again, Matthews, best goal scorer in the league right now, in my opinion. He should score at the very least 45 goals. I think he probably should be a shoo-in to score 50 plus. That's why I have him scoring 55. Now, last season he was at a 65 goal pace. I'm not sure if he scores exactly at that rate. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me given how elite he is at putting the puck in the net. But I just feel like it might have been a little inflated given the North Division. I feel like they have a little bit of weaker defense. But at the same time, there's no taking away from Matthews being an elite goal scorer in this league. And 50 plus, that's totally fair for me. This depends on if he can play all 82 games. I think there has been some reports that he might miss the start of training camp. But if he's back for the start of the regular season, you should expect 50 plus goals over 82 game pace. And in third, I got John Tavares scoring 28 goals and 49 assists for 77 points. Even though Austin Matthews is so elite, John Tavares would easily be a number 1 center on the majority of the teams on the NHL. But because he has Matthews in front of him, he has the luxury of playing in the second line center role where many teams' defenses won't be focusing on him as much. Throughout his entire career, you know exactly what you're going to get from Tavares. I mean, he hovers around a point per game basically every season. He's a solid all-around player, so this is pretty fair production. He should be hovering around 80 points. And in fourth, I'm predicting William Nylander to have a pretty good year. 32 goals, 42 assists for 74 points. Now, a lot of Leaf fans would say that William Nylander needs to be a little bit better at certain points, but when he's on his game, I feel like he is one of the most threatening guys on the ice. I just feel like he has the skill set to be a perennial 30-goal scorer. He just needs to shoot the puck more, and I feel like he probably should hover around 70 points. Maybe he gets a little bit less, but I guess I'm very high on this guy. And disclaimer, this is coming from a Habs fan, so believe me, this is as unbiased of a take as it gets. Then in fifth, I have Morgan Rielly scoring 8 goals and 42 assists for 50 points. I mean, for Rielly, you should probably pencil him in for roughly a 50-point season, especially on an elite offensive team on the Toronto Maple Leafs, where he has a ton of options, a ton of people to feed the puck to who are going to finish. He should get a ton of points. About 50 points seems fair. So getting into my expectations for the Toronto Maple Leafs this season. Now, in terms of what I think they'll do in the postseason, not sure. That's still very much up in the air. But in terms of this regular season team, how they fare in the regular season, I just don't think I see a scenario where they miss the playoffs. With that, I have them pretty high here. Second in the Atlantic Division, a 49-24-9 record for 107 points, making the playoffs in that Atlantic Division. Again, they have all the skill set in the world. The issue for them is not to make the playoffs. I just feel like on paper they have a great team and they should do fairly well in the regular season. Even if Jack Campbell and Peter Mrazek aren't world beaters, I don't feel like they need amazing goaltending to have success in the regular season. Just because of how elite they are offensively, they should easily be top 10 in goals. I just really like this roster on paper, and there are some teams in the Atlantic Division that I have slight doubts for, which is why I feel like they should easily finish second in the Atlantic Division. I might even say the second best team in the Eastern Conference. I think I'd take the Leafs over any team in the Metro as far as the regular season is, at the very least. I mean, great offense. The goaltending tandem, I think, is pretty solid. And honestly, they have underrated defensemen. I think last year they took a huge step defensively. I think a lot of people should probably, be aware that this team might actually be able to shut down some opponents. So how elite they are in the regular season, that to me, it's a no-brainer. I think this team is very much poised to return to the playoffs and be a very solid team, probably getting home ice advantage in that Atlantic Division. But again, in terms of what they do in the playoffs, we'll have to see. And I forgot to mention this at the beginning of the video, but since I have finished up all my Atlantic Division previews, I'm going to give you a quick recap on how I see the Atlantic Division standings playing out this season. So in first place, I have the Tampa Bay Lightning finishing with 118 points. Obviously, being back-to-back Stanley Cup champions, I feel like they have the most complete roster in this Atlantic Division. I feel like they should run away with it. I have them winning the President's Trophy, actually. Just look at their team offensively. They're one of the best. Defensively, they're one of the best. And they have the best goaltender in the league right now. So this decision for them being in first place, very simple for me. In second place, like I mentioned, I have the Toronto Maple Leafs having a very good regular season, finishing with 107 points. Again, them too, very talented roster on paper, very good offensive team, very underrated defensive team, and a pretty solid goaltending tandem entering this season. Third, I'm going with the Boston Bruins here, finishing with 101 points. Now, although I don't think this team will be as dominant as they were last season, I still feel like they should hover around 100 points. I mean, they have Patrice Bergeron, Brad Marchand, and David Pastrnak on that top line, really carrying them offensively, and I see no reason why they can't do that again. I also think they're a very underrated defensive team, much like Toronto. And in goal, I feel like Linus Ullmark is a very solid goaltender. He played really well in Buffalo, and especially now going on a Boston Bruins team that is much better and is much better at shutting the door. I feel like he should thrive in that role. Now, Boston's just always a threat every year for me, and even with the loss of David Krejci, and that is a huge loss in their second line center role, I still feel like they're going to find a way to make the playoffs until proven otherwise. But here we go. I have the bold take here. I only have 3 teams making the Atlantic Division. So in fourth, I have the Florida Panthers with 95 points and just missing the playoffs. If you want, you can go check my Panthers video. But for me, I just have concerns with the goaltending. I don't think Sergei Bobrovsky is ever going to be that Vezina goaltender he once was. I just feel like he has not been a fit in Florida, and that contract is just atrocious. And then you have Spencer Knight, who's only a rookie, and I feel like this would be a ton of pressure on him to really provide a ton of great goaltending and shut the door for this team. Even though they have an amazing offense, I just feel like their overall game needs to be a little bit better for me. And I just feel like they're maybe being a little bit overhyped. Now, I can obviously see them making the playoffs, but for me, I guess I'm going bold here, having them just miss. And there's 5 teams in the Metro that I think will make the playoffs over the Panthers. And in fifth place, I got the Montreal Canadiens with 91 points. Despite that run to the Stanley Cup Finals, this is definitely a significantly weaker team. Definitely down the middle here outside of Nick Suzuki. After recording this video, I still don't know about the Jesperi Kotkaniemi situation, if he's going to walk to Carolina or if Montreal is going to match that offer sheet. But they lost other guys as well. They lost Philip Deneau, who was a key piece in that Stanley Cup Finals run, especially in the defensive end. And they lost Shea Weber, who may not ever play again. It just looks like down the middle, they're very much depleted. And although I do feel like they have a ton of solid wingers, defensively, I feel like they're missing some pieces there as well. And in goal, I know they have a pretty decent tandem with Jake Allen and, of course, Carey Price, who was outstanding in the playoffs. But the question remains, what kind of Carey Price are we going to get? Are we going to get a playoff Carey Price in the regular season, or are we going to get a regular season Carey Price? The regular season Carey Price that has been the regular season Carey Price for the past few years, a below average goaltender. And if he's like that, it's going to be very tough for this Montreal Canadiens team to compete, especially in a very stacked Atlantic Division. Then in sixth, I have the Ottawa Senators finishing with 83 points. Although I don't have this team making the playoffs, I feel like there's a young team with a ton of upside, and I feel like they really are on the rise. I just think this core here that they're building in Ottawa has a ton of potential, and I think they're going to be very competitive, more competitive than most people might think. And I feel like they're going to surprise people and steal a ton of games like they did last season even. In seventh, I have the Detroit Red Wings finishing with 69 points. Definitely do like what Detroit is doing, and they're definitely a team moving in the right direction. But for me, I don't quite have the same hopes as I do for Ottawa, I guess. I just look at the team offensively, and I think they're well behind Ottawa right now. And in terms of defense, I feel like it's about the same. But I do like the goaltending that the Red Wings have. A tandem with Thomas Greiss and now Alex Nedeljkovic could be very solid. And they have some pretty young pieces coming in, like Lucas Raymond can maybe make an impact. Mort Seider on the blue line can be very solid for them. So there's a ton of young talent to like. But as of right now, I still think they're probably a bottom 5 team in the NHL. Then 8th, of course, Buffalo Sabres. This is not really a shocker here. 60 points. They're not going to be a very good team just because, you know, the Jack Eichel thing and just their roster on paper is very bad, and they got even worse. So I feel like 60 might even be overestimating them. But yeah, they're definitely a shoo-in to be last place, no question about it. So this is going to wrap up my season preview for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I am now done with the Atlantic Division coverages. Let me know what you guys think about where I see the Toronto Maple Leafs. Do you agree with me and think they'll be a pretty dominant regular season team? Or do you think they're going to struggle to make the playoffs in a very tough Atlantic Division? As for the rest of these Atlantic Division teams, you can let me know your opinions as well. But that's going to do it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Click like if you like this video. Please consider subscribing to the channel, and I will talk to you in the next one. See you guys later.